All righty. So, chapter 1 of our Memler's textbook, we are looking at the organization of the human body today. So, we're going to sort of look at how we lay everything out because we have to have a pretty clear language to speak, right? This is one of the things that's really important to understand as a trainer, right? Like, if you say something and I say something else and we both mean the same thing, we're miscommunicating, right? Or if I say something and you say something and we both say the same thing, but we mean different things, like that's going to be a communication breakdown, which means that you could end up like doing an exercise improperly, or you could apply the wrong type of stress to someone. And, that could be very damaging in our industry as a whole. So, doctors, personal trainers, physiologists, scientists in general, right, have to have a very specific language to speak. And so we're going to go over a little bit of that language today. So for instance, we're going to work our way through understanding what body studies are, our types of study, how it's all organized, and then various body systems. We'll get into some directional terms today. And then we're not going to spend too much time talking about metabolism or, like body cavities, for instance, not super important for personal trainers. Now, if you were like a massage therapist, body cavities are actually very important because there are different regions of the body where moving fluids around. For instance, if you're doing like a lymphatic drainage massage, great, yeah, you need to know exactly where those lines run. We're not going to talk as much about that. That's not relevant to us as much, so we'll probably move through these bottom sections relatively quickly. But looking at it, first things we're going to talk about, this is our anatomy and physiology class. So what's the difference between anatomy versus physiology? Well, anatomy is the study of body structure, right? Normally this is achieved through dissection. So get ready. We're going to do some dissection when we meet up on Monday. I'm kidding. That would be insane. That's how they like practice, how we sort of learn anatomy. So anatomy is the body labeling, right? Like that is like our study of what something is, right? Like, you think about like labeling where a certain river is, or labeling like what a certain part of town is, or labeling a part of the body, right? Doesn't really tell you much about it. So that's where physiology comes in. Physiology is the study of body functions, the study of what the body does, right? So my bones are labeled as such. I've got my radius and my ulna, I've got my humerus, I've got my cranium, right? Those are all the names of bones, but they do different things, right? My radius and ulna, for instance, allow me to pronate and supinate the wrist because they can move like this. My femur is this big, long, hard bone that allows you to have a structure and deal with all the weight of the rest of my body coming down and impacting, right? And my cranium protects my brain, right? So different bones are going to do slightly different things. I can move, my radius and ulna a lot. There's a lot of range of motion here. There's elbow flexion, pronation, and supination. The femur, not so much, not a ton of movement there. It really just does a little bit of rotation and flexion, extension. And my cranium doesn't do any movement at all. It's sitting on top of my neck, and my neck does movement, right? But like that's part of like the study of things. I don't want a lot of movement in my skull. It's there to protect a very important, very soft tissue. Therefore, we want it to be very stable, So the physiology is what stuff does, and anatomy is what stuff is. So we label things using anatomy. We understand their function looking at physiology. And then there is pathology as well, which, Carlos, that's more Brooks' area. That's the study of like diseases. We don't do a lot of disease specific stuff. In fact, it's actually pretty important for us as trainers to understand that our job is not to treat diseases. Now, have I had 100 clients lose a lot of weight and then not have to go on insulin anymore, and so they're really not even considered a diabetic? Yeah, I've had that happen a lot of times in my career. Lots of people I've worked with have stopped needing their insulin, and they've increased their insulin sensitivity, and they're no longer considered diabetic. But I didn't treat diabetes. I treated their body, and they lost a lot of weight. and then their body is generally healthy. So like we made them healthy, and therefore they stop dealing with disease. So pathology will come up every now and then. We're going to talk about things like osteoporosis, for instance, and we'll talk about like arthritis. Those are diseases, right? And there are certain diseases associated with sedentary lifestyles, obesity, and poor diets and things like that. But we're not treating those diseases directly. That's a very important thing to remember, right? We don't want to step into the realm of doctoring. We're simply keeping it in the realm of health, right? There's a difference between wellness and medical treatment. So looking at the levels of organization, earlier I kind of mentioned this a little bit already, but this is one of my favorite concepts. Like you look at the way like an atom is organized. Like here, just pull up a picture of an atom, right? So an atom is these are building blocks of the entire universe that we live in, right? Periodic table that you might remember from high school. I'm not going to spend too much time on that today, but you look at this, right? And it's like you got all these like little things surrounding. This is what we call the nucleus in the center there, and then there's all these little electrons that kind of surround it, right? So this is like the main center of the atom. What's crazy about that is your cells have a very similar arrangement. In fact, your cells have a nucleus as well, right? They have this like big giant organelle in the center. And it's being protected by all the other stuff, right? And then like you think about it, like all of your central organs are centered in your body, right? And so like, all the stuff that allows you, my brain is at the very center of my skull here, right? My digestive system and all my vital organs are kind of protected by this rib cage, right? And so like that's kind of a similar arrangement that we see. And then like I could take it even further. Think about like how crazy it is that we arrange like our society around having like, a town hall, and then like a city kind of works its way out from there, and like people live on the outskirts and they do like different things, but like it kind of goes through like the central like governing body or whatever, right? And then like you have a state that's a part of a country, and then like countries are like on these continents that are part of a planet, and that planet is surrounding the freaking sun. Like it's amazing. Like it's all kind of the same organization. There's a center thing, and then there's all the very cool stuff on the outside that sort of interacts with that center thing. And so I just love that. It's one of my favorite sort of like things that I really love to nerd out on. But zooming back in like crazy, we take a look, and we're made up of like little chemicals, right? And all those chemicals come together to kind of make up our cells, right? And then we get a whole bunch of cells that come together, giving us like a tissue, right? You've got pacemaker cells in your heart. You've got skin cells that come together to make up all of your skin. You've got endothelial cells, is what they're called, that make up your stomach and a lot of other, part of your digestive organs. You got bone cells that come together to make up bone tissue. And eventually all that tissue comes together to make up an individual organ. So when you hear the word organ, you probably think of your stomach or your heart, your brain, all that stuff that we learned in school. But here's the thing. From an anatomy standpoint, every single one of your muscles is its own individual organ. Every one of your bones is its own individual organ. Your fingernail is its own individual organ, so you get 10 of them, like, hopefully. So we all have like, these different like organs. It's just a grouping of tissues, right? So we got to look at how each organ sort of interacts, and those organs are going to work together with other organs, right? So for instance, if we look at like your humerus, ulna, and radius, you take a look at like those three bones in particular, right? So here's your humerus here. That's your upper arm bone. You guys can't see me because I minimized myself. There's that one. That's your humerus. Then you've got your radius here, and you've got your ulna. So your radius is on this side, and your ulna is on this side. So there's an organ, there's an organ, and there's another organ. And those three organs work together to give you a framework so that your muscles can have something to manipulate, and they provide like a protective like structure, so then like if I were to take these things, I'm just going to go ahead and do kind of a very janky drawing today, but let's just say like I took an organ that ran down from here and inserted right there, kind of runs up like that. Well, there's your bicep, right? And so if it pulls this way, that's how we create like elbow movement. So these organs come together to make up a system. In this case, the skeletal system. And the skeletal system not only gives you your body like a framework, but it also is able to be manipulated through the use of your skeletal, of your muscular system. And your muscular system is made up of a whole bunch of different muscles. Each of those muscles is its own individual organ. The bicep does this. Well, the tricep does this, right? Those are totally opposite movements, right? Both vitally important, but opposite. So this is why we're sort of labeling out our anatomy, right? The deeper that we can understand this, the more specific we can be when picking an exercise, right? Because if I go to the gym and I do a whole bunch of stuff where I'm like pressing this way, right? My triceps are going to grow and that's going to be good. But, if I never do any bicep work in the opposite direction, I'm not achieving balance in the body. So then my body might start moving in ways that it really wasn't intended to, really wasn't designed to. There might be a little bit of grinding here. Those bones might grow a little bit closer together because like one side of the joint tightens up, right? Because maybe one muscle gets what we call overactive. Well, when that happens, things start rubbing and then there starts to become dysfunction. And so one more reason, just as a reminder, why we study all this like heavier science stuff, because it does allow us to translate those lessons directly into the gym. So those organs come together to make up systems. All of those organ systems come together to make up, well, you and me. So there's a lot of different systems out there. We can see there's your integumentary system. It's known as your skin. We're not going to deal too much with that. That's not really our area. There's the skeletal system, which is hugely important for us. There's the muscular system, which is also hugely important for us. Those are two parts of the kinetic chain. Then we've got the coordination and control systems, like your nervous system. Those three systems there, skeletal, muscular, and nervous, that's your kinetic chain. That's how we create all of our human movement. You get the endocrine system. That's all your hormones. They went crazy when you were a teenager, and maybe they're still going crazy today. We got our cardiovascular system, which is how we move nutrients around the body, along with our lymphatic system. And then we have like the respiratory system, which gathers oxygen from the environment. We got the digestive system, which gathers nutrients from the environment. Then we got our urinary and also parts of the digestive system that's also responsible for getting waste out of the body. And then we've got our reproductive system, everybody's favorite, that we are not going to be talking about. But all of those systems kind of come together to make up the science of us. And so we're going to be talking a lot about that science over this sort of 12-day class. Any questions so far, guys? How we all feeling? Any questions or comments or concerns?
Yeah, I got a question. These power slides are your personal power slides, or they're part of this book?
They're part of this book, actually.
Okay.
So this actually looks a little bit different than some of our other slides. These are some pre-made slides that they sent us, which is really nice because it actually goes directly in the same order as the textbook. So if you are following along in your textbook, you'll actually find like you'll find the not chapter setting like chapter names, but you'll find like section headings probably labeled the same as the PowerPoints here. So yeah, that's a good question actually. When we move into exercise psychology, that'll also come directly out of the materials and stuff, but that was written by, just so you're aware, I have written Sochi has written very few of the PowerPoints. The kinesiology class was all me. The exercise physiology class, that one's all me. But we try not to do that very often. We want to make sure that they're coming from the materials that you're tested on, Same thing with test questions. I actually have not written, well, that's not true. I've probably written 4 or 5 questions in the entire PFT program. So like homework questions and stuff, they are all written directly from NASM, which means they're written by the same people who wrote the test that you have to take to get your certification. So you can kind of get used to their language over the course of your 9-month journey. So yeah, that's a great question. I think you're the first person ever asked that. I've never had that question before. That was fun.
Honestly, it's because I'm a little confused because I'm not seeing these titles. So metabolism is regulation, and it's regulation.
Yes.
See like the pictures.
Interesting. You should be this. I don't think this is chapter 1. I think this is chapter 2. Oh, it is chapter 1. This should be in the first section of chapter 1 there.
Right, like when I'm opening of chapter 1, I just see the integumentary system, and then I just see like hair follicles, and then it goes into the skeleton, and then it's like a muscle goes into the brain, the eyeball. But these are all kind of like
maybe the section header's not quite the same, but like check out the next paragraph. It should get into metabolism. Oh, we had Alan for a second. It should hop into metabolism in like the next little bit there. I should go down to Sochi and get my copy so I can follow along with you guys. But yeah, so we're gonna work our way through like this little section here. By the way, you might notice that like my notes are going along in the order of this PowerPoint as well. So that'll sometimes help you. So the section, I don't know, the section header might not be quite labeled like this. But yeah, these are made by Memlers. And they sent it to us.
I'll just keep up with your notes.
Yeah, try that, and then let's circle back and see if we can get in a rhythm here. You might find that like maybe it's just not direct here in the beginning, and then it'll sync up in a second.
No worries, thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, let's take a look. So metabolism, love talking about metabolism. Everybody who's been with me for a while knows that. It's probably one of my favorite topics. But when we're talking about metabolism, we want to take a wider approach to our understanding of metabolism. A lot of people, when they break that word down, they're like, oh yeah, it's how many calories you burn in a day. Or, they might say like it's if you have a speedy metabolism, you get hungry all the time. If you struggle with your weight, it's because you have a slow metabolism, right? But here's the thing. Metabolism is so much more than just that. It is any chemical reaction that takes place inside your body. If it's a chemical reaction, it's part of your metabolism, right? So to say that you have a slow metabolism is kind of saying that like you're not creating chemical reactions well in your body. And I don't know if we would say that that's scientifically very accurate, but like, let's say, you take a potato chip and place it on your tongue and it starts to break down and you taste saltiness. That little bit of like saltiness that's interacting with your taste buds, right? You've got like little receptors that are, binding to little sodium bits, and then that goes to your brain. Your brain's like, oh yeah, something salty, awesome, bring it in. We love salty stuff, right? That's part of your metabolism, actually. That little chemical reaction right there. Or if you taste like a little bit of sugar, something really sweet hits your tongue, right? That lights up the parts of your brain that are associated with things that taste sweet. Fun fact, cats don't have that. Like a house cat, they can't taste sugar. They don't have those receptors. So that's a part of their metabolism that's a little bit different than ours, So metabolism is any single chemical reaction that takes place. Now, metabolism is going to move in one of two directions. Okay, there's two versions of metabolism here, right? So it's all chemical reactions. So there are reactions that break stuff down, like for instance, when the potato chip hit your tongue, it's the saliva starts working its way through the potato chip to help break it up. There's some chemicals in your saliva called salivary amylase, actually. And salivary amylase's job is to take carbohydrates and break them apart. Big long chains of sugars. It's gonna kind of chop them up a little bit, right? So a little bit of a chemical reaction that takes place there. But then you also start like chewing, and that's allowing it to get even more. And then you're gonna swallow it, and it's gonna go into your stomach acid, and your stomach acid's really gonna break some of the proteins found in that potato chip. Now, potato chips are not exactly a high source of protein, so it's probably not going to stay in your stomach that long. But any of the proteins that are in there, they're going to all get pulled apart. They get broken down into little amino acids, right? So that's a breakdown, something, this big, long, complex thing called a potato chip. Now it's just a series of chemicals, right? And so then eventually it's going to move into our bloodstream, right? It gets into the small intestine there. And then all those chemicals, they pass into our bloodstream. and they get carried around. Let's say you worked out earlier. Well, like I said, potato chips, not a great source of protein. But any of the amino acids that got broken down that used to be protein, well, it's going to go to repair any of that muscle damage that you created last time, right? All of the carbohydrates found in a potato chip are going to go to be used as energy later. And then any of the fats are either going to be used as energy later, or, maybe they'll contribute to making like a new cell wall or something like that, right? So when I say that, let's say we take all those fats and we start putting them together to make up a cell wall, that is building something from something very simple and turning it into something very complex, like a human cell, right? We take the proteins found and we put those into like a muscle. We took something very simple like a chemical and we turned it into something very complex like a muscle. We took that, actually, the energy release is actually more of a breakdown, but that is sort of the opposite direction. So metabolism goes in one of two directions, right? It's either anabolic, which is building something up, or catabolic, which is breaking something down. So we think about like, metabolism in general here, right? If we sort of just like put this here, right? Right. It goes in two directions, right? You've got catabolism. We'll put that going this way, right? So we'll say that this is catabolism, and that's breaking stuff down. Okay. So that's taking something really complex and breaking it down into individual little pieces, right? Arrow here, right? And breaking it down into little tiny pieces. That's a catabolic reaction. Okay. And then we've got anabolism, which is exactly the opposite, right? That's going this way. So anabolism, or anabolism, depending on how you're pronouncing it, right? That goes in this direction. And that's taking something really simple, or a series of very simple things, right? And building them up into something very complex or big, taking something small and making it into something big. So those are that's sort of what our metabolism is, right? You're either taking something complex and breaking it down, or taking something simple and building it up. So, when I always tell people, this is kind of funny, but like, you don't build muscle in the gym. Like, that's not what you're doing. When you go to the gym, your muscles aren't getting bigger. They're actually getting smaller. You are breaking muscle in the gym. You're building muscle in the kitchen. You're building muscle in bed, the next day when your body, broke all that muscle down. I was like, oh no, it all got damaged, right? But then you go eat dinner, and that dinner's got some protein in it. And so all that protein kind of gets broken down. And now you've got building blocks to build it up. And your body's going to go, all right, well, all that muscle got damaged. Clearly, it's not strong enough. You know what we should do? We should make that muscle a little bit bigger, stronger, and resistant to damage for the future. So that's what happens. It builds it up. It makes it a little bit more complex. And that's an anabolic reaction. So your body is constantly trying to maintain balance between the catabolic breaking down of stuff and the anabolic building up of stuff, right? It's constantly trying. It's constantly trying to sort of maintain this balance. We have a word for that. We call that homeostasis, right? Homeostasis is your body's internal balance, right? Your body's job is to maintain homeostasis, right? So if you ever get outside of normal ranges, your body will do everything that it can to sort of get you back to neutral. So if you take a look at like blood sugar, for instance, your blood sugar might look something kind of like this, right? So what we're seeing, go ahead and take this over to pink so I can mess with it. What we're seeing in this picture here is like, this is someone's like regular blood sugar, right? So like what happens is like, they haven't eaten in a couple hours, and so their blood sugar gets really low because your body uses sugar to produce energy, right? That's what carbohydrates are. They're these big complex chains of sugar, right? And so, you know, like it's going down, it's going down. Now, there might be like a lower limit here that your body really doesn't like to hit. And so, like, let's say we put that lower limit, we'll put it like right here, you know. Um, so anytime we drop below this purple line, we start to get hungry, right? Now, this person waited a little bit too long to eat, right? So their blood sugar got really low. Maybe this is somebody who doesn't like to eat breakfast, right? So they slept through the night. You know, doesn't take a lot of energy to keep you moving at night. But then, like, they don't have breakfast because, you know, maybe they're just not a fan of breakfast. Clearly, I'm talking about my mom right now. My mom hates breakfast. Uh, so then she gets very hungry a lot of times, like later in the day. So then you consume like a really big lunch, right? It's like really common for people to sort of overeat when they let their blood sugar get too low. So what that does is that brings their blood sugar really, really high. Now, the problem with that is when your blood sugar gets way too high, you know, that is often where your body goes, oh no, I need to create like a massive amount of insulin, right? So anytime we get above this line, our body goes, I got to get the sugar out of the blood. And that's where it produces insulin. Insulin's job is to pull sugar out of your blood and either drive it into your cells to produce energy or drive it into your cells to be stored as energy later. We call that glycogen, or it gets turned into body fat, right? So you get above this line, your body goes into pull sugar out mode. And then all of a sudden, your blood sugar plummets like crazy, right? And so, you know, that's where suddenly we're having a really hard time controlling our cravings. So then you eat a lot of food that brings you, you know, this would actually be great. If we fall into this like middle range here, this is fine, right? But then like, you know, maybe we get a meal that's a little bit larger than it needs to be. Maybe that takes us above the line, right? So then goes into storage mode. That's where you get these like sugar crashes, right? So when you spike your blood sugar too rapidly, it leads to hunger later on, you know? And that's why so many people have a hard time like controlling their cravings. So, you know, let's take a look at a slightly different version. We'll sort of clear this out so I can work with my own images here. But you think about like, you know, we'll put the two lines here. Oops. Right, and we'll put this one down. Put this one, put this one up here. Right. So anytime you know, we'll say like let's look at like a poor diet, right? So we'll put the poor diet in red here. This is kind of the one we're trying to avoid. So like you eat something that causes your blood sugar to just absolutely spike, right? Well, then your body goes, oh no, creates a ton of insulin that causes your blood sugar to plummet. Anytime you get below the dark purple line, your body gets major hunger cravings, which is why we tend to overeat. So then it does this again, right? And then that causes it to drop, right? And then we bring it up again, right? And then it causes it to drop. And it's like, man, like we just cannot balance this thing out, you know, like we're just having real problems with balance here. Versus like, let's say you eat a more balanced diet. You don't overeat, but you get enough energy, right? Well, that's going to cause your blood sugar levels. Yeah, sure, it'll cause it to spike, but look at like how much longer the energy lasts. And then like, you know, my blood sugar slowly drops, right? But I don't let it, you know, get too low. Maybe it goes a little bit below the line there. And so then I don't overeat. I control my cravings, right? And it kind of keeps me here and I don't ever end up above the line. I still got through, you know, this is we'll say this is 8 a.m. You know, we'll put that here at the beginning, right? And then we'll call this like 12 a.m. You know, we'll put it at the end of the day, right? For somebody who kind of stays up late, right? So, you know, like I was able to get through a whole day here without ever really getting too many hunger cravings. And I was able to like really make sure that my body didn't go into massive storage mode. Because anytime we get up here, you know, anytime we end up like here, right? That's your body going, wow, I need to get rid of all this sugar in my blood. And so then it just pulls it, turns it into fat, you know? I mean, it turns into glycogen as well. But if your glycogen stores are full, it doesn't have anywhere to put any of that sugar. So it turns into fat. And that's why, like, you know, you hear people say, hey, it's really important for you to eat a lot of small meals throughout the day. Here, my new folks, Gerald and German. Have you guys ever heard people say that? They'll say, like, hey, it's better to eat like 6 small meals throughout the day because it boosts your metabolism. You ever heard that?
Yeah, it always kind of confused me because I guess I have a high metabolism, so I felt like if I ate just big portions a couple times a day, it would slow my metabolism down, and I didn't want that fast metabolism.
Oh, okay. All right. Gerald, you ever heard that?
Yeah, I kind of change my diet to like little portions throughout the day because if I eat big portions, I tend to get sleepy.
Yeah, your body goes into like storage mode. So here's the thing, it does nothing to your metabolism. I just said metabolism is how all the chemical reactions. Do you think that it's going to speed up chemical reactions by eating tiny little meals? No. But here's the thing. Here's what's really interesting. So that is a false information. I don't know who started saying that one day, but the whole human race now believes it. And it's like, ah. But here's something that's interesting. I think this is probably where this person probably who started this, I'll bet this is where this came from. We do see that people who eat smaller meals more frequently throughout the day tend to control their weight a little bit better. They do tend to have an easier time losing weight. They do have an easier time sort of maintaining a healthy body weight. So the conclusion is, oh, it must be speeding up their metabolism. That's the conclusion that somebody drew. But that doesn't make any sense when we understand like the science of metabolism. Like it doesn't speed up chemical reactions. The chemical reactions are going to take place according to the speed of your thyroid. And this doesn't have any effect on your thyroid. Um, so why is it that eating small meals frequently throughout the day has such a positive effect? Well, because of this. It's just easier. You eat a smaller meal, it doesn't cause your blood sugar levels to spike. It causes it to stay within a normal range. And then maybe you reset it more frequently. So, maybe it looks something kind of like this. It's a lot of little pyramids up and down, but it never gets out of a normal range. So then it just stays in. It's easier for you to control your hunger levels. Whereas this, if I let myself get too hungry, I'm likely to overeat and whoosh, I spike it. And then whoosh, that causes it to drop, and that's just not awesome. That's just not how we sort of want to manage things here. So we are definitely going to talk more about this in depth in the class that's actually meant to talk about this. This is just my favorite example uh, when we get to nutrition. But yeah, that's sort of what we're seeing there, right? Yeah, it doesn't necessarily actually have any effect on your metabolism, but hunger is a really good example of your body trying to maintain balance. When you don't have enough food, your body makes you hungry because it's trying to maintain balance. When you have too much food, your body might make you sleepy, which is kind of funny, but like that's trying to put you in rest mode so it can focus on digestion. Because here's the thing, you only have so much blood in your body. And when you exercise or when you're being very active, your body is prioritizing blood flow to your muscles to move you around and do stuff. So after Thanksgiving dinner, we're all sitting there like, I can't stay awake, and that's because your body is processing all of this food. It's trying to slow you down so it can allocate resources to your digestive system. So, hey, you know what? Why don't we go take a nap? Let's go take a nap. And that's sort of like where that kind of comes from. So, German, you can feel free to eat however you want. It is not going to affect your metabolism. And then Gerald, if you're having trouble, if you feel much better on small, frequent meals throughout the day, I would say that's a good advice, or that's a good situation to put yourself in to, keep you functioning properly. Um, so yeah, so that is homeostasis, right? That's you managing your balance. Now, there are a billion other examples of homeostasis in the body. Let's say your blood pressure drops a little bit low in one area. You know what your body will do in order to like increase pressure? It'll constrict your blood vessels. And what that does, that causes blood to kind of build up and then shoot through to the other side. Or if we want to increase blood flow to a certain area, we'll dilate the blood vessels. And that'll open it up and drive blood to a specific area. So our body is maintaining homeostasis. Let's say, it's really hot in your room. And so you start sweating, right? Well, the reason you do that is because like by having sweat on your body there, as cool air runs over it, it's going to carry hot temperature away on that air. you're going to heat up the air, you're going to lower the temperature of your body. So what ends up happening is your blood actually moves to the surface of your skin and all the vessels open up, which is kind of cool, right? That's what's happening whenever you're like hot and sweaty, right? And then when you're cold, the exact opposite happens. Your blood vessels constrict so that it can keep blood from losing temperature to the atmosphere. So that's your body trying to maintain homeostasis. When you break down muscle in the gym, your body's going to make you feel hungry a couple hours later so you can bring in nutrients in order to repair so it doesn't lose body tissue. Your body's always trying to maintain balance. So how does it do that? How does it maintain balance? Well, it uses a process called negative feedback. Negative feedback describes any process that gets your body to return to a source. So, if we consider like this metabolism, right? This is the source here in the center, right? We'll say that that's the source, right? So anytime we anabolically do something, our body's probably going to catabolically try to bring it back to the source. Anytime we catabolically do something, it's going to try to anabolically bring it back to the source, right? It uses negative feedback to do that, right? So think of negative feedback as like the thermostat in your house. In fact, that's the example that we can see here, right? So your thermostat is set to, what do I have it set at? 70 degrees, right? So the thermostat is set to 70 degrees. So this is such a funny example because this is not what would happen in Los Angeles. But where I'm from in Oregon, let's say you leave the door open by mistake, and so the room cools down. Again, in LA, I'd probably heat up, especially here in August. But where I'm from, where it's very cold, let's say the room cools down. So now the room's temperature is 66, but you can see the temperature is set to 70. That's what we set it to. So then that activates the furnace, right? The furnace kicks on, and hopefully the temperature in the room rises back up to 70 degrees. It used negative feedback to return the room's temperature to whatever source you set on the thermostat. Same thing is true of your body's cooling mechanisms, right? You start to get too hot, your body will start to sweat, using negative feedback to get you back to this middle line. You get too cold, your body will start to shiver and use negative feedback to get you back to this line. So negative feedback is how our body returns to a source. You bring in food, your blood sugar levels go up. Your body needs a little bit of negative feedback to get you back to regular blood sugar levels. So what does it do? It creates insulin. Insulin takes that sugar out of the blood sugar levels decrease back to normal, and we've used negative feedback to return us back to our source. And then we don't eat for a couple hours and our blood sugar level gets too low and it tells us to intake food and the process repeats, right? Now there is also positive feedback, but we don't talk about positive feedback quite as often. Positive feedback is intensifying a response, right? So like, for instance, like let's say that something needs to be boosted, right? It's like, oh, like I need to sweat a little bit, right? That's negative feedback. But let's say it's not intense enough. It didn't work. And your body goes, wow, we need to really intensify that response and sweat even more. That's what positive feedback is. So we don't see that quite as often because your body's pretty good at doing what it's supposed to do, right? So we use negative feedback to maintain our source, our homeostasis. This is actually one of the reasons why it is kind of so difficult to gain muscle mass. Your body does not like the idea that you are putting on muscle tissue. Now you would think that your body would love it. It's like, no, I'm stronger and more efficient. I can move through the world a little bit better. But your body doesn't really love it because now it's got more tissue that it has to run and provide for. It's got more mouths to feed. And so your body's like, oh gosh, we got to bring in more calories, So your body really does not try to build muscle if it can avoid it. And it really doesn't like burning fat either. Whenever you have an excess of calories, your body prefers to store it as body fat because that's a very low energy expenditure tissue. It's a tissue that really doesn't burn that many calories. Muscle burns a lot of calories. So it's harder to balance the books if you put on a bunch of muscle tissue. Put on a lot of like fat calories, Your body has a really easy time balancing the books. And now it has a bunch of like energy stored that it can break down for later if you ever end up on a deserted island with no food, you know? So your body loves building fat. And it really doesn't like burning fat away. It stored all that energy for a reason. It put all that money into a savings account for a reason. It really doesn't want to drop that off. So there we are. We're seeing like one of the reasons why it is so difficult for some people to maintain weight and build that muscle mass. We need to give our body a reason to grow muscle, which is one of the reasons why we strength train, and we need to give it the resources to grow that muscle, which is why we need to eat in a calorie surplus. Or if we're trying to lose weight, we need to have a calorie deficit, but we got to be careful because we don't want to have too much of a calorie deficit. Because if we do, the body goes into panic mode and it tries to get rid of things other than fat, because fat is the preferred energy source for storage. And it tries to get rid of things that burn lots of calories. I just said muscle burns a lot of calories. It's one of the reasons why we don't want to drop our calories too low. It messes up our homeostasis. So that's homeostasis in a nutshell. That's sort of a brief introduction to metabolism and some concepts that we're definitely going to be going over later this module. Any questions on any of that, or any of that too confusing for anybody? Cool. Speaking of maintaining homeostasis, I'm like trying to get my protein in. Awesome. All righty. So next thing we got to talk about. Actually, sorry. Wait, is that what oh no, it's all at the very end. So next thing we got to talk about our directional terms. Okay. So directional terms are a standardized set of words that we use to describe body locations and body movements. So, we're gonna watch a video in just a minute that's gonna have a really good example of this. But like, let's say you have like some type of ache or pain in your body. Your doctor is gonna need a very specific language to speak with other doctors in order to describe where that ache and pain is. Because like if they just say it's like on the upper part of the arm, that's not very specific. What if this person, this is a scenario that would probably never actually happen, but what if this person was upside down when that doctor was, monitoring them? Well, the upper part is what I would consider to be the lower part of the arm, or when they say like the arm, like, it's like, I got two sections of my arm here. What do you mean? Right? So we want to have a very specific language to speak when we're describing where stuff is. So we have our directional terms here, right? So we're going to have, and all of these are going to have opposites to them. This is a really good way to memorize this information, is to memorize them in opposites, right? Memorize, when I say the word yang, you probably think yin. When I say up, you probably think down, right? When I say left, you probably think right. Right, it's very easy to Superman to Lex Luthor, like it's very easy to memorize things when you sort of like memorize what it is you're trying to remember and its opposite. It's one of the best ways to play like code names or board games or things like that, right? So here are directional terms. Here's some of the main directional terms inside the body. So we'll go ahead and use a circle here. That's how I kind of like to do this, right? So we'll go ahead and divide this circle into, sort of 4 sections here. We got a left side. We got the left. We got the right. We got the upper. And we got the lower. And those aren't necessarily directional terms. They're just going to be kind of helpful. I don't know why I put left and right like up here. So if something is superior, it means that it is above a point of reference. Okay, so if I don't give you a point of reference, we're just going to assume the center here is the point of reference. So anything that's like above this line is what we consider to be superior. Okay, and anything below this line is going to be the opposite. That is what we consider to be inferior. So in general, my head is superior and my feet are inferior, right? So superior is above, inferior is below. Now, there's a 2D drawing, so I got to switch back to the PowerPoint for this next one. We've also got anterior and posterior. Anterior is on the front, posterior is on the back. My mom used to always threaten me when I was a child to, bruise my posterior. As a phrase that I heard a lot as a kid. And that is this back section right here, right? So that is the anterior versus posterior. Anterior is the front, posterior is the back. My face is on the anterior part of my skull, and the back of my head is on the posterior part of my body, right? My chest is anterior, my upper back is posterior. My kneecap is anterior, the back of my knee is posterior. Then we've got medial, which is closer to the midline. So if we are moving towards this midline here, that is what we consider to be medial, or towards the middle, right? And then if we move away from the line, that is considered to be lateral. Okay, actually, I'm going to move these. You know what? I'll move medial. I don't like having that in the same box. So medial is closer to the midline. And lateral is further from the midline. So my nose is very medial. My eyeballs are a little bit lateral. My ears are very lateral, right? And then we've got the two kind of confusing ones. We've got proximal and distal. So there is a difference here between the middle of something and the center of something, right? Like this horizontal line right here, right? This horizontal line right here. This is the middle of the circle, but also this vertical line right here is also the middle of the circle, right? So the center of the circle is where both middles meet. That's the center. So if we have something that is closer to the center of something, sort of moves at a diagonal here, that is what we consider to be proximal. And if it is moving away from the center of something, that is what we consider to be distal. So those are some of our main directional terms. That's sort of how we label out different parts of the body. However, proximal and distal also refer to the arms and the legs very often. So for instance, like, you think about like our wrist is pretty far away. It has to travel a long way to get back to my center, right? Versus my elbow, which is still also has to travel a long way. So I would consider my wrist distal compared to my elbow. But my wrist is proximal compared to my fingers, because my fingers are even further away, right? And that's where that one gets a little confusing, but like, think of it as like drawing a line and then measuring how long that line is. That's how I kind of like to think of it. And it's like, proximal is within proximity. It's not far away. Distal is at a distance. It is, held at a distance. It is far away. So medial, lateral, anterior, posterior, superior, inferior, and then proximal is close to, distal is far away from. So those are some of our main terms here, right? And you'll see those terms every now and then. I actually don't think they come up that often. I think we give them a little bit more credit for than they deserve, in terms of like, NASA will ask you questions about them. They make really good. This is the type of stuff that I always warn people about. It makes a really good test question, because it's a very clear definition. But I don't think it's necessarily something that actually comes up that often in the gym. But you think about like a lateral raise, or like where a lateral muscle, like the way, that's where the name came from. It's the more outside part, right? And your shoulders are lateral compared to your chest, which would be medial. Or if I'm moving from lateral to medial, right? Like sometimes you'll hear those terms there. But like they don't come up as often as as we say. Now, something that does come up all the time are our planes of motion. Okay, so our planes of motion are these imaginary lines running through the body. They actually look kind of similar to this circle that we drew, right? We got these lines running through the center here, right? They're kind of similar to that. And so when we're talking about our planes of division, we're going to divide the body into 3 imaginary lines that sort of cut our body through at right angles. Okay, so you can see this one right here. You can see he's got a left side, he's got a right side. This one right here, you can see he's got a front side and a back side, and he's got a top and he's got a bottom. Right. So if you look at the planes of motion, there's also a 2D drawing that I kind of like to pull up every now and then. This is kind of an interesting one right here, right? So you can see we've got a left and a right side. We got a lower and an upper side. And we've got a back and a front side, right? So that's another sort of way to look at the planes of motion there, right? So we generally move along these planes, okay? So like, for instance, the first one we'll look at is the frontal plane. So you can see my front and you can see my back. So if you were to cut me down the middle here, right? Slice me in half, you know, like this, right? Anything where I move along that slice, anything like this that's very lateral, that is a frontal plane movement, right? So like lateral raises, for instance, are a frontal plane movement. Leg abductions are a frontal plane movement. Side lunges are a frontal plane movement. Lateral band, like side shuffling, is a frontal plane movement, right? Moving my head side to side like this or like this is a frontal plane movement. Anything where I'm moving side to side is going to be considered frontal plane, okay? So if you divide me like this, and it's always kind of easy to remember the frontal plane, you know, go up to a wall and keep yourself attached to it and then move along like with it, right? Like this is a very frontal plane situation, right? If I do a shoulder press like this, right? You can see I'm sort of sliding along with like a plate of glass if it was like traveling through me, right? So I stay sort of connected between that, right? Then we've got the sagittal plane. The sagittal plane divides me into a left side and a right side, okay? So the sagittal plane, I would move, it goes, you know, it's like cutting me this way, right? There's like a sheet of glass going that way and that way, cutting through my body, right? So if I move along it like this, you know, to keep that connected, that's the sagittal plane, right? So for instance, bicep curls are a sagittal plane movement, right? Squats are a sagittal plane movement. Lunges are a sagittal plane movement, right? Tricep extensions. Bench pressing is a little twisty actually, but there's a lot of sagittal stuff happening. So I'm moving front to back. Chin-ups, sagittal, right? So anything, walking most of the time, or backpedaling, right? Those are sagittal because I'm moving with this imaginary line that's dividing me this way. It travels infinitely in that direction. It travels infinitely back in that direction. So that's the sagittal plane. Most exercises that you think of in the gym are probably sagittal plane exercises. Like most of them are, which is one of the problems with not having an integrated workout program. You know, I think that's the difference between like an advanced program written by a trainer and a very basic program written by whatever gym equipment somebody built one day. You know, like there's a lot of sagittal plane stuff out there. Yet we as human beings, we move through the frontal plane, we move through the transverse plane all the time, you know, which is one of the reasons why so many people get like injured, right? You have a lack of frontal plane movement in your ankle, for instance, you will sprain your ankle. Like, let's look at this called inversion of your ankle here. You know, your ankles, this is a frontal plane movement, right? It's side to side like this, right? It's twisting. So a lot of people are not very good at frontal plane movements because they focus primarily on the sagittal plane. They run forwards, which is great, but they never learn how to side shuffle. So then all of a sudden one day they step in a hole, sprain their ankle. Overstretch this ligament right here called your good Lord. I'm forgetting the name of that freaking ligament. Ah, I do this for a living. Oh my God. It's not LCL, LCTL, or LTCL, lateral talocrural ligament. Oh, I gotta hit the books. So then we've got the transverse plane, right? We got an upper section and we got a lower section. So this is kind of an interesting one, but this moves like this, right? Like if you were to, have a plate of glass, divide me, cut me in half like this, right? Then there's like a sheet of glass sort of traveling out infinitely in all directions, right? I would twist along it like that, right? That's a transverse movement, right? Spinning your arm is transverse, right? Spinning your head is transverse. The neck is a really good example of all three movements, right? Here's sagittal, here's frontal, and here's transverse, right? So those are sort of our three major movements. And again, transverse and frontal stuff is usually what we're missing. So you can see we're moving along these imaginary lines. All of the exercises, all the movements that you create in everyday living are these planes of movement primarily. Now, I will say it's not perfect. Think about like elbows, right? Like you think about your elbow doing like a bicep curl. Okay, so let's say you're just doing a regular curl. Sometimes you feel like, you get a little twist in there, right? Your forearm sort of twisting. Yeah, this is primarily a sagittal exercise. Is there a little bit of transverse movement? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. But primarily stuff is going to take place in one plane of motion mainly, right? Looking at some exercise examples here, some examples of like frontal plane movements would be like a dumbbell lateral raise or side shuffling. An example of some sagittal plane movements would be like bicep curls or walking lunges. And some examples of like transverse movements would be like a Russian twist or a wood chopper, right? Those are really good twisty movements, right? Or a curtsy lunge would kind of be a good one, right? Anything that's very twisty. So those are our main plays. Now, there are some different body regions. Like I said, we're not going to spend too much time on this. But you see, like, you're going to have like your trunk versus like your legs. It doesn't really come up in our anatomy lessons. We don't really care where chunks of the body are. We care how the individual body parts move, so we don't really do too much lumping, I guess is the best way to put it. But that is the end of the PowerPoint. So I do want to show you guys a video to kind of recap everything. This is a type of video that I absolutely love to show in class. It is by a company called Crash Course. They do a really, really good job of like animating these different things. So he's got a really good sort of like animated drawing of these different planes of motion and stuff. So we're going to see Crash Course. This first episode here. You'll see that he kind of, this is not by Memlers, but you'll notice that this kind of goes in the same order that we did. So let me share the sound here. Open that up, and here we go.
I'd like you to take a second and really look at yourself. I don't mean take stock of your life, which really isn't any of my business, but I mean just look at your body. Hold up your hand. Wiggle it around, take a sip of water, hold your breath, sniff the air. These things are so simple for most of us that we don't give them a moment's thought, but each one of those things is so much more complex than it feels. Every movement you make, every new day that you live to see is the result of a collection of systems working together to function properly. In short, you, my friend, are a magnificent beast. You are more convoluted and prolific and polymorphously awesome than you probably even dare to think. For instance, did you know that if they were all stretched out, your intestines would be about as long as a 3-story building is tall? Or that by the time you reach old age, you'll have produced enough saliva to fill more than one swimming pool. Or that you lose about 2/3 of a kilogram every year in dead skin cells, and you will lose more than 50 kilograms of them in your lifetime. Just tiny, dried up pieces of you drifting around your house and settling on your bookshelves, feeding entire colonies of dust mites. You're your own little world, and I'm here to help you get to know that world, the body that you call a home, through the twin disciplines of anatomy, the study of the structure and relationships between body parts, and physiology, the science of how those parts come together to function and keep that body alive. Anatomy is all about what your body is, physiology is about what it does, and together they comprise the science of us. It's complicated science, I'm not gonna lie to you, and it draws on a lot of other disciplines like chemistry and even physics. And you'll have to absorb a lot of new terms, lots of Latin, gobs of Greek. But this course isn't just gonna be an inventory of your individual parts or a diagram of how a slice of pizza gives you energy, because these disciplines are really about why you're alive right now and how you came to be alive, how disease harms you and how your body recovers from illness and injury. It's about the big picture stuff that we either spend most of our time thinking about or trying not to think about. Death and sex and eating and sleeping, and even the act of thinking itself. All processes that we can understand through anatomy and physiology. If you pay attention, and if I do my job well enough, you'll come out of this course with a richer, more complete understanding not only of how your body works, everything from handshakes to heart attacks, but I think you'll also start to see that you really are more than just the sum of your parts. We've come to understand the living body by studying a lot of dead ones, and for a long time we did this mostly in secret. For centuries, the dissection of human bodies was very taboo in many societies, and as a result, the study of anatomy has followed a long and slow and often creepy road. The 2nd century Greek physician Galen gleaned what he could about the human form by performing vivisections on pigs. Da Vinci poked around in dead bodies while sketching his beautifully detailed anatomical drawings until the Pope made him stop. It wasn't until the 17th and 18th centuries that certified anatomists were allowed to perform tightly regulated human dissections, and they were so popular that they were often public events with admission fees attended by the likes of Michelangelo and Rembrandt. The study of human anatomy became such a craze in Europe that grave robbing became a lucrative, if not legal, occupation, until 1832 when Britain passed the Anatomy Act, which provided students with plentiful corpses in the form of executed murderers. Today, students of anatomy and physiology still use educational cadavers to learn in person and hands-on what's inside a human body by dissecting them. And it's totally legal. The cadavers are volunteers, which is what people mean when they say that they're donating their body to science. So what have all these dead bodies shown us? Well, one big idea that we see over and over again is that the function of a cell or an organ or a whole organism always reflects its form. Blood flows in one direction through your heart simply because its valves prevent it from flowing backward. In the same way, your bones are strong and hard, and this allows them to protect and support all your soft parts. The basic idea that what a structure can do depends on its specific form is called the complementarity of structure and function. And it holds true through every level of your body's organization, from cell to tissue to system. And it all begins with the smallest of the small, atoms. Just like the chair you're sitting on, you are just a conglomeration of atoms. About 7 octillion of them, to be precise. Fortunately for both of us here, we've covered the basics of chemistry that every incoming physiology student needs to know in Crash Course Chemistry, so I'll be referring you there throughout the course when it comes to how things work at the atomic level. But the next level up from the chemistry of atoms and molecules includes the smallest units of living things, cells. All cells have some basic functions in common, but they also vary widely in size and shape depending on their purpose. For example, one of the smallest cells in your body is the red blood cell, which measures about 5 micrometers across. Now contrast that with the single motor neuron that runs the length of your entire leg from your big toe to the bottom of your spine, about a meter from end to end. Typically, cells group with similar cells to form the next level of organization. Tissues like muscles, membranes and cavity linings, nervous and connective tissues. When 2 or more tissue types combine, they form organs. The heart, liver, lungs, skin, and etc. that perform specific functions to keep the body running. Organs work together and combine to get things done, forming organ systems. It's how, like, the liver and stomach and intestines of your digestive system all unite to take that burrito from plate to pooper. And finally, all those previous levels combine to form the highest level of organization, the body itself. Me and you and your dog, we're all glorious, complete organisms made from the precise organization of trillions of cells in nearly constant activity. This ability of all living systems to maintain stable internal conditions no matter what changes are occurring outside the body is called homeostasis, and it's another major unifying theme in anatomy and physiology. Your survival is all about maintaining balance of both materials and energy. You need the right amount of blood, water, nutrients, and oxygen to create and disperse energy, as well as the perfect body temperature, the right blood pressure, the efficient movement of waste through your body. All that needs to stay balanced. And by your survival depending on it, I mean that everyone's ultimate cause of death is the extreme and irreversible loss of homeostasis. Organ failure, hypothermia, suffocation, starvation, dehydration, they all lead to the same end by throwing off your internal balances that allow your body to keep processing energy. Take an extreme and sudden case. Your arm pops off. If nothing is done quickly to treat such a severe wound, you would bleed to death, right? But what does that really mean? What's gonna happen? How do I die? Well, that arterial wound, if left untreated, will cause a drastic drop in blood pressure that in turn will prevent the delivery of oxygen throughout the body. So the real result of such an injury, the actual cause of death, is the loss of homeostasis. I mean, you can live a full and healthy life without an arm, but you can't live without blood pressure, because without blood, your cells don't get oxygen, and without oxygen, they can't process energy, and you die. With so many connected parts needed to make your life possible, you can see how we need a hyper-precise language to identify the parts of your body and communicate what's happening to them. A doctor isn't going to recommend a patient for surgery by telling the surgeon that the patient has an achy belly. They're going to need to give a detailed description. Essentially, it's like a verbal map. So over time, anatomy has developed its own standardized set of directional terms that describe where one body part is in relation to another. Imagine a person standing in front of you. This is what is called the classic anatomical position, where the body is erect and facing straight ahead with arms at the sides and palms forward. Now imagine slicing that person into different sections, or planes. Don't imagine it too graphically, though. The sagittal plane comes down vertically and divides a body or organ in left and right parts. If you imagine a plane parallel to the sagittal plane, but off to one side, that plane is the parasagittal. The coronal or frontal plane splits everything vertically into front and back, and the transverse or horizontal plane divides the body top and bottom. Look at that body again, and you'll notice even more divisions, like the difference between the axial and appendicular parts. Everything in line with the center of the body, the head, neck, and trunk, are considered axial parts, while the arms and legs, or appendages, are the appendicular parts that attach to the body's axis. Everything in the front of your body is considered anterior or ventral, and everything in the back is posterior or dorsal. So your eyes are anterior and your butt is posterior. But you'd also say that your breastbone is anterior to or in front of the spine, and the heart is posterior to or behind the breastbone. Features toward the top of your body, like your head, are considered superior or cranial, while structures that are lower down are inferior or caudal. So the jaw is superior to the lungs because it's above them, while the pelvis is inferior to the stomach because it's below it. And there's more. If you imagine a center line running down the axis of a body, structures toward that midline are called medial, while those farther away from the midline are lateral. So the arms are lateral to the heart, and the heart is medial to the arms. Looking at the limbs, your appendicular parts of your body, you'd call the areas closer to the center of the trunk proximal, and those farther away distal. In anatomy talk, your knee is proximal to your ankle because it's closer to the axial line, while a wrist is distal to the elbow because it's farther from the center. Okay. So pop quiz. I'm eating a club sandwich. I'm not. I wish I was. But imagine I am. I'm so ravenous and distracted that I forget to take out the little frilly toothpick at the top, and I end up swallowing it with a raft of turkey bacon and toast. A fragment of that toothpick gets lodged somewhere in here, and my doctor takes an x-ray and says I need surgery. Using anatomical language, how would she direct the surgeon to that tiny wooden stake inside of me? She might describe it as being along the medial line, posterior to the heart, but anterior to the vertebra, inferior to the collarbone, but superior to the stomach. That would give the surgeon a pretty good idea of where to look, in the esophagus, just above the stomach. I warned you at the beginning. A lot of terms, but all those terms might just save my life. And hey, it's the end of your first lesson, and you've already started to talk the talk. Today you learned that anatomy studies the structure of body parts, while physiology describes how those parts come together to function. We also talked about some of these disciplines' central principles, including the complementarity of structure and function, the hierarchy of organization, and how the balance of materials and energy, known as homeostasis, is really what keeps you alive. And then we wrapped it all up with a primer on directional terms, all held together with a toothpick. Thank you for watching, especially to our Subbable subscribers who make Crash Course available not just to themselves, but also everyone else in the world. To find out how you can become a supporter, just go to Subbable.com. This episode was written by Kathleen Yale, edited by Blake DiPestino, and our consultant is Dr. Brandon Jackson. Our director and editor is Nicholas Jenkins, the script supervisor is Valerie Barr, the sound designer is Michael Aranda, and the graphics team is Thought Cafe.
Okay. So that's kind of a recap of all of our terms. Normally, what we're actually going to do is we'll probably watch a video beforehand, give you a chance to kind of see those animations, and then afterwards follow it up with my sort of lecture detailing what's going on. But that is actually about it for you guys' first lesson here in the youth mod. Any questions today? Al, Gerald, German, Marjan, Eric, how you guys feeling?
That was great, man. I like that. So much information, but I can see that with the images that you provided.
It is a lot, especially in the beginning. We actually kind of do that on purpose, but you know, anybody else in this call right now, they can tell you guys it's very circular. We'll see it won't be the last time we see these terms. Gerald, how you feeling?
Pretty good. Our bodies are just really complex than what we thought, what it is. So,
Oh yeah.
so yeah, there's a lot of info, but
Yeah.
that's
Love it.
Yeah.
Al, Marjan, Eric, how you guys doing? Feeling good? Thumbs up.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah, all clear. Yeah, feeling good, Brad.
All righty, guys. Cool. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and end the recording and kick all y'all out of here, but I'm gonna keep Gerald and German just really quick. I'm gonna show you guys the canvas stuff really quick, just so you can see like how it operates. And other than that, that's the end of your first lesson. I will see you guys. See you tomorrow.